What's up, Night Owl? Steely here, back with another video, and today I want to help you DMs that are running a Rime of the Frostmaiden game transition from Chapter 1 to Chapter 2. I'm going to go over what I think the players should know, what the players should have, and what you want to get done by the end of Chapter 2. And I just want to mention that if you're still in Chapter 1, I have videos covering all of the different 10 towns as well as the different quests that you get from those towns. To start things off, we're going to keep it pretty simple. Going into Chapter 2, you want your party to be level 4. This is pretty straightforward in the book. It says that this chapter is designed for a 4th level party. Some of the random encounters might be more difficult for a 4th level party, but you can gauge that based off the roll. Sometimes they might have to run away. But ultimately, you get to decide as a DM what they're going to be up against. And I'll do a separate video on random encounters and how to run those. I'll probably do that one next before I start doing the quest videos. But going into chapter 2, you want them to be level 4. Character advancement in this chapter is pretty simple. For every 2 or 3 game sessions, the players gain a level. For every threat that they neutralize at the different quest locations, for every 2 or 3 threats they neutralize at the different quest locations, they'll gain a level. Also, if they accomplish some great feat, they gain a level. I personally just did 2 points of interest per level, and depending on how much pacing you want your game, how fast paced you want your game, or how slow you want it to be, that is up to you as the DM. How fast do you want them to level? How fast do you want them to progress? Because if the players are really into it and they're really enjoying it, or if you're running a bunch of friends and you guys are really loving the setting, scrap that and just do all of the quests that are available. They're all great in their own way. And again, I'll do videos on each of them covering the ones that I enjoy the most and the ones that may need some work. But chapter 2 is really free form. So feel free to scrap this and just kind of level them as you feel they deserve it, because they may branch off and decide not to do some of these points of interest that you present to them. And keep in mind, these are side quests. Your party doesn't have to do them. These are just optional. If they come up with their own idea and they start trying to chase their own plot, encourage it, nurture it. Some groups may want to build up the Ramshackle Inn. I would recommend using the rules from Waterdeep Dragon Heist and Troll Skull Alley. Follow those guidelines for having them set up this inn and get it running, and maybe even turning a profit. If they want to build up Caer Dineval, the castle, they can do that. They can build up their own base. Things like that. Whatever your party wants to pursue. If they have backstory stuff, things like that, roll with it. Roll with it. Chapter 2 is so freeform that it's so optimal for things like that. At the end of Chapter 2 is where it's going to be kind of up in the air. Going into Chapter 3, I'm going to briefly mention this. Going into Chapter 3, you want them to be level 5. And the reason for this is Chapter 3, and this is according to the book. All of this is up in the air. It's completely up to you how this goes. But by the book, Chapter 3 says that you can't go past level 6. This is verbatim. Cannot go past level 6 in Chapter 3. So if you go into Chapter 3 at level 6, there's no level advancement. If you want them to progress in levels and kind of have a purpose for going in there, in my opinion, or chance to level, go into Chapter 3 at level 5, which means this chapter is only going to give you 1 level, but you will be going back to Chapter 2 as you do the other chapters to kind of fill in the gaps. And that's up to you if you want to go down that route. If you like some of the quest here in Chapter 2, you can go back to them after the other chapters. Now, Chapter 3 is an optional chapter. You can skip it and go into Chapter 4, which is the dragon flying around 10 towns and destroying the place. The party has the option when they end Chapter 2. They're essentially going to end Chapter 2 in front of the Chapter 3 dungeon, the Sunblight Tower. And it's at that point that the dragon will be released and the party will decide whether to go into the tower and deal with the Duergar. That's Chapter 3. Or they'll go the other direction and deal with the dragon, which is Chapter 4. If they decide to do Chapter 4 first, and they're approaching Sunblight Tower at level 5, they veer off and do Chapter 4 instead of Chapter 3, maybe come back later to Chapter 3. If they do Chapter 4, they'll reach level 6, assuming that they were level 5 when they approach Sunblight Tower. They'll be level 6, at which point they won't be able to get the level from Sunblight. And again, that's up to you as the DM. But by the book, Sunblight says that you can't exceed level 6. And chapter 4 says you can't exceed level 7. So by character advancement, these chapters are designed to clear out Sunblight, hit level 6, move on to chapter 4, defeat the dragon, level 7. And then from level 7, you move on to chapter 5. And I'll go into much more detail about those chapters and those levels and advancement and my opinions of it in a later video. But for now, for chapter 2, they approach Sunblight Tower, level 5. They clear the tower, reach level 6, and then move on to chapter 4, where they will hit level 7. Of course, your party might have different plans. They may decide to chase down the dragon and ignore the tower or come back to the tower later. What I would recommend for that, because chapter 2 is designed to take the party to level 7, chapter 2 is always going to be a fallback for filling in those levels. You can do a couple of quests from this chapter, get those extra levels to make up, and then move on to whichever chapter. Maybe have a random encounter, or they encounter one of the spots, one of the points of interest from chapter 2 as they're exploring or as they're making their way to whichever chapter that they decide to pursue. The next thing I want to talk about is overland travel. In chapter 1, you spent a lot of time going between the different towns and then adventuring to a point nearby to the town to do your quest and then go back to town. With chapter 2 has a very similar layout in that you're going to be kind of wandering around, except instead of wandering around 10 towns, you're going to be wandering around Icewind Dale. So it's a much bigger map, much more wilderness. So at this point, as the DM, you want to have a pretty firm grasp on overland travel. Now, the important thing to remember is that your party, if they are on foot with snowshoes, that they're going to be moving at half a mile per hour. If they have mounts, dog sled, if they have axe beaks, they're going to do double that, 1 mile an hour, which means as they're traveling to these points of interest throughout these different quests, they're going to be covering several days of travel. I know it doesn't seem like much when you look at the map and you drag the arrow across. If you're using Roll20, you drag the arrow, or if you just use a ruler on the physical map that came with the book, it's not going to seem like very much. 20 miles, 15 miles, it doesn't seem like much. But remember that they only travel 8 miles in a day, 8 hours. So it's going to take several days to cross this tundra. The next thing that I want to talk about is a couple of recommendations that I have as the party advances to this next chapter, things that I feel like they should know and things that I feel like they should have as far as equipment. So equipment and knowledge. The first one, the most important one in my opinion, is the party should know about chardeline, the dark ice metal that the Duergar are using to build the dragon. There's not a lot of opportunity in chapter 1 to present chardeline because it's so rare. So I would actually fill that in as loot somewhere in this chapter, in one of the different quests. You can kind of squeeze that in there. Or maybe even in the previous quest, you could have a +1 weapon that's made out of chardeline. As the metal actually takes on magical properties very well, you can kind of incorporate that in, and they can learn about this metal that way. The reason I feel like the party should at least know about it and be familiar with it and familiar with its rarity is it will make the seeing of when they see the dragon fly out of Sunblight, completely made out of this super rare metal, a lot of things will click right there. But if the party has never heard of chardeline going into chapter 3, you lose a lot of that wonder of seeing this dragon made out of this super rare metal and what the Duergar have been working on this whole time. And to sort of piggyback off of that point, there's not a lot of opportunity to present Duergar. As a matter of fact, if they haven't encountered any Duergar and don't know anything about him at this point, the speaker that presents the quest and the location of Sunblight will actually tell them, hey, there's Duergar in Icewind Dale and they're plotting something. Go check it out. And that's how you transition to chapter 3. I would recommend that you at least hint at, maybe have some Duergar pop up, or you hear about them, or have them as a random encounter, and maybe they're carrying some chardeline. You can check a lot of blocks if you just add a Duergar random encounter while they're out there. They have a couple of chardeline. You can explain what that is. You have these Duergar. There's a lot of questions right there by having this random encounter. And I guess I'll cover that in the random encounter video. But that would be a really good opportunity to hint at the fact that there's Duergar on the surface. Definitely hammer home the fact that Duergar are on the surface. That's a pretty big deal. They're building a base on the surface, actually, and collecting this rare metal. Those two are really key, in my opinion, and it will have a bigger impact going into chapter 3 if they have knowledge of these things. As far as equipment, I feel like the party should have +1 weapons. Maybe not all of them, but at level 5, your melee, your fighter, your barbarian, your paladin, they should have +1 weapons. There's none. There's like no magical items. And I'm just going to mention this here. One of these quests has a creature that can only be hurt by magical weapons. Why? Like, I've been scouring this book looking for like something, and they're just so rare. You got to be really specific on it. So give them +1 weapons. Put those in there. I mentioned a couple in the quest. Read these quests. Watch the quest videos. Don't put your party against something like that. Banshee has resistance magical weapons, but essentially doubles her health because no magical weapons around. And there's a flesh golem in it, an ascendant. What's the party supposed to do to that? So, in my opinion, they should have +1 weapons. I make it a point as a DM to to give the party a mount. So, axe beaks in this case. My party's going into level 5 should have a base, a mount, some magical weapons. Maybe not everybody has magical weapons, but some, at least some. A scroll of raised dead in case a party member drops. Sometimes it happens. A scroll of raised dead in the party loot does not take away from the impact of a character dying. It doesn't. It just doesn't. A death is still meaningful even if the party is carrying a scroll of raised dead. It's not something in the heat of combat and your HP is low. That scroll isn't on the party's mind, but it's still there. So the great thing about giving out a scroll of raised dead as party loot is that you get to keep that intensity and that drama of a party member dying and still having that character back. And I'm sure that's debatable. That's a debatable thing. Like when a character dies in Dragon Ball Z and they can just wish them back or use the Dragon Balls, or in Avengers when a character dies, are they even staying dead at this point? But I would argue that those are still dramatic events in those stories, and you don't get to lose, and you don't have to lose the character. So scroll of raised dead is essential. I will always give a scroll of raised dead as party loot somewhere before level 3. Potions and scrolls. I have a list of potions and scrolls that I love giving out as the party levels to 5 for low level parties to get as they're going to level 5. And it's at this point when I run groups, these things are essential. And that's on scrolls, a scroll of knock and a scroll of dispel magic. These two will go a long way. If the rogue misses that thieves tool roll, or they encounter a puzzle that they just can't quite overcome, scroll of knock moving forward. The scroll of dispel magic is same thing. If they encounter something magical, and the wizard won't always prepare that dispel magic. Maybe they got other priorities. Scrolls like that, those utility spells that wizards never know when they should prepare it, like dispel magic. There's so many utility spells like that you just like, should I prep this for today? What are we doing today? That I like giving out as scrolls to kind of free up those spell slots for the wizard. And I house rule that scrolls can be used by anybody. And that's my own personal preference. But I like giving out those scrolls that anybody can use, and that allows the party to kind of make a tactical decision to overcome specific difficulties. And with the potions, same thing. There's a lot of buff spells that are great in a pinch in case the party, a boss fight is maybe going south, or they made some bad rolls against a random encounter. Potions with really good buffs can really turn the tide on a battle. And they're just really fun. And they're and it still feels like they're getting really meaningful loot when they find them. And my ideal potions are mostly buff potions. Potion of Stone Skin is great The reason I love Stone Skin so much is because it has 100 gold piece spell component. So you can knock off that spell component. They get that spell slot. If the cleric doesn't want to prep Stone Skin or they don't have that spell component, boom, they've got the potion. They can get that resistance. Potion of Death Ward. It lasts 8 hours and it just prevents a death. That's a really solid one. Potion of Haste is really fun. That's one of my favorites. Give a party a Potion of Haste and they will hold on. They will cherish it, waiting for that right moment to use it. Mirror Image, Blink, things like that. All those buff spells, really fun. They're really fun to give out to the party, and they're consumable, so you don't have to worry about. They only get that one. So if you feel like you made a mistake, you only have to live with it that one time when they drink that potion, and that's it. So I really love potions and scrolls like that, and I really up the spell level compared to the party. If the wizard's casting 3rd level spells, give them a 4th, maybe even a 5th level potion or scroll, because it's got to have that meaningful impact when they use it. Something to think about. And that's it for the video. I realized this felt like kind of almost like a filler video, but these were things that I felt were essential that I wanted to get out in a single video, a video that will help you transition to chapter 2. Things that you need to get ready for, things that you want to have done by the end of chapter 2. Going into chapter 3, 4, or 5, whichever they choose. And just a couple of my own little things that I personally like to give out to parties as they get to that second tier, that tier 2 power level where they get 5th and they start getting extra attack and those 3rd level spells and they really come into it. I see so many DMs get so nervous about 5th level and just how powerful they get. You don't want to throttle it. You want to encourage it. The mounts, the base, these potions, these scrolls, these encounters that they're going to be up against. This is all part of just becoming this very powerful being and getting stronger throughout it. I feel like this video is becoming more broad strokes than it is. This is less of a Rime of the Frostmaiden video and more of a, hey, here's what you should do, DMs, when your party reaches 5th level. But it all holds true. Encourage them getting more powerful and read chapter 3, 4. Chapter 3, 4, and 5 are going to be tricky to transition to. So just be ready for that. Read ahead because they're going to move to chapter 3 and they very well might end up going back to chapter 2 and then go to chapter 4. Chapter 5. They may continue to bounce back to chapter 2 because chapter 2 by the book can take them as far as level 7. So read up on those quests, find the quest that you like. I'm going to do videos on each of them. Read through them. If I haven't done a video on it yet, read through them. Find the ones that you like. I will definitely mention some of my favorites. And that's all I've got for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know how YouTube works. Hit those buttons. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what your favorite quest in chapter 2 is. And if you're a DM looking for players looking for a DM, make sure you join the Discord, link in the description. Come by, ask questions, let me know what you think. And as always, I'll see you at sundown.